Hi, everybody, and welcome to the fourth episode in our series all about mastering business with Adam Daniel, who's going to drop some amazing knowledge bombs and explain some things that will really be insightful for your journey in business. So we've done 3 already. The first one was all about the fundamentals of business. Then we talked about the growing of the business, and then it was the growth of business and beyond. But we've got some other things I think are really, really important to talk about. So Adam, welcome along again for the 4th episode.
Well, thanks for having me back, Teresa.
Amazing. So can you talk to us about what we're going to cover and why we thought that might be a good sort of thing to reflect on at the end of this series?
No, of course. As you said, we've covered 3 sort of general topics of the fundamentals, how to grow or begin and grow your business, and then how do you then take it to the next stage or the next level. And that makes business sound very linear, i.e. you start off, you then have a bit of growth, and then you go to the next level. A word you hear a lot on social media is scale, the big popular word, which I don't always agree with. Yet the idea that there's sort of 3 stages and it's going to be very linear. Well, I think we're all aware, working with clients and working with people, success certainly is not linear. And what that means is when you start your own business, whatever that might look like, is there will be rejections, there will be failures, and there will be setbacks along the way. And so that's what we're going to talk about today. I guess we're going to talk about, the science of failing well. That's what we're going to look into today. And I do use the word science deliberately. We do come from a scientific environment, I guess, in health and fitness and personal training, etc. However, there's now such a huge body of evidence behind how we can fail intelligently. And that's what we're going to explore today is how do you deal with setbacks? How do you fail intelligently? And also we're going to talk about something around mastering the art of Kaizen.
Amazing. I think it's really important that you reinforce to people who are looking at business that there are going to be setbacks. It's just natural in life, isn't it? And it is the way we can reflect on them and actually grow from them. So hopefully the business does go up that way. But you're right. There seems to be this sort of idea that it's all going to go one way and it's all going to be easy. And actually, we're going to dig a lot deeper into that. So let's talk about, and maybe you use some of your own examples or examples of some of the people that you've mentored and supported. How do we even start to deal with setbacks? You know, and maybe even clarifying what a setback might look like in the field of business and fitness.
Interesting. What does a setback look like in the idea of or world of business and fitness? Well, I think the first thing to appreciate and understand is a setback can literally be anything. And the key thing is, though, is how you personally define a setback. Because a setback for me might be very different for a setback from you, Teresa. So it's our perception of what it is. So I guess the way we would look at a setback would be something that you would hope would happen and doesn't happen. Now, how you respond to that is ultimately about what the outcome will be like and how significant that setback could be. So really a setback could be, for example, I know if you are starting your personal training business and you would hope to have 10 paying PT clients within 3 months and you're only at 9. That's maybe a minor setback because you had some financial goals you'd wanted to hit. So that could be a setback. It's probably not going to be the end of the world. It's probably going to be something that frustrates you and annoys you, yet it's not going to have a massive impact in how you move forward. Well, assuming you choose to embrace the setback.
And I think, you know, it's when we look at success, I'm sure you and I, you know, say success is completely different. You know, what is it? Is success that I do get 10 clients, or is success that I, you know, work out with other professionals or our network? So there's so many different versions of working well in the business, isn't there? And success. But I think it's, you know, I guess when I heard you say that, is it worth exploring what might happen if you're going to have a setback? For example, let's say that PT who's thinking, right, I'm going to aim for 10, but if I only achieve 8, this is what I have to do. Should we always be sort of guarding ourselves about, in case things don't quite work out, or do we deal with them when it there's not the success we wanted?
What jumped into my head then as you said that is this something we try and plan for, prepare for? In sort of Stoic philosophy, they talk about negative visualization. Now, what they mean by that is planning for when things might not go to plan. And that's exactly what you mentioned there. So when dealing with setbacks, it might well help is saying, okay, here's my target, here's my aspiration, this is what I want to achieve. Now, I believe I've got the skill set to do that. I believe I've got the time to do it and the capability to do this. However, let's just visualize or write down what happens if it doesn't go to plan, because then you know how to deal with it. So it's a bit like, I don't know how people are working with their clients. It would be very similar to working with a client, to moving towards a fitness-based goal. It's great. Here's your goal. What's going to stop you from achieving that is the question I often or have often asked clients, is what could get in the way? Because then they might say, well, time. And you ask the question, well, okay, what could you do to make sure that doesn't happen? I need to put it in my diary. I need to plan more effectively, whatever the answer might be. So now what they've done is they've preempted the possible setback or failure. Let's maybe use the word failure in that case. So it's no different for someone in the business. If we've got a PT out there, someone running a PT business or a small group program, let's use actually a different example, which I think might be better, is when you lose your first client or your client doesn't continue. That would be, some people say that as disastrous. However, I consider that a setback when you lose a client. So if all of a sudden you start to visualize what happened. So, okay, I've got my client base at the moment. My business is going well. The money's coming in regularly. I've got my programs all set up and business is good. However, let's be realistic. And again, another phrase to throw in there is this idea of realistic optimism, i.e., yeah, things are going great, yet the reality is that that's not going to keep on going on that upward trajectory that we spoke about. So visualizing or planning for when that first person says, hey, Adam, I'm not going to be able to continue my personal training, will help you overcome the setback. And now, not just the fact you've had that conversation in your head of what that might look and feel like, it's then knowing what you're going to do when that time comes. So as a PT, I might know that, yes, business is great at the moment. I've got a full diary. The reality is, though, someone might drop out at any time for any reason. What's going to happen when that happens? How, first of all, will I deal with that emotionally? Because it is almost like a rejection for a lot of people. When that first PT client says, hey, Adam, I'm not continuing, then we take it personally more often than not. So first question is, well, how will you deal with that? So what emotions might arise and what do you need to do to make sure you don't take that personally? We'll come on to that a bit later. And the other thing is, then, okay, it happens. What are you going to do to replace that client? So you've got a strategy in place. So now all of a sudden you're not scrabbling about trying to fill that slot. Maybe you've got a wait list that you've been curating over 6 months. Maybe you've got, I don't know, you can then start to offer some kind of incentive to your current client base to bring some of their friends in, whatever it might be. You've got something in place to deal with that setback.
Yeah. You said something that I think is probably existed for all of us about taking it personally. Like, I love the fact that, Adam, you role played your first client going, sorry, Adam, I can't continue. There's a lot of clients that just won't pay, or they just won't turn up, and there'll be no explanation, or it's a quick text message. I can't make this one, and they keep on dropping out. And I suppose, it would be lovely, wouldn't it, if we could check in with that client if they had been nice enough to say, I'm sorry, I can't continue. And there's a lovely explanation like, oh, I'm moving abroad, or I feel I've met all the goals I wanted to. But actually, the reality is often quite different. And taking it personally, what I want to explore is how we don't take it personally, but also have the opportunity to reflect, because I think it will bring up a whole load of feelings, but what do we do with that? But also, when we're coming up with strategies and what ifs, and like you say, what happens if I lose my client? What happens if what I want is people not to be able to take it personally too much, and also not worry themselves constantly with the fear, like, because we want people to safeguard themselves, don't they, and sort of future proof themselves, and making sure that their business is going to continue working well without worrying them. Yeah. And also without them taking things personally. So can you give us some wisdom on how to deal with those two things?
Wisdom, I love that word. I'm glad you feel I can provide wisdom. I think the key thing is separating your performance from your identity. And what I mean by that is that as a PT, as a Group X business owner, we often put the two together. I.e., I am a personal trainer, and everything that I do is my identity. I identify it's the who are you, Adam Daniel? I'm a personal trainer. No, I'm Adam Daniel. I'm a human being, and I happen to create or generate income through personal training. So it's separating who you are from what you do, first of all. Obviously, that's easier said than done, because we do identify a lot as who we do, as a lot of beliefs and behaviors that are aligned, for sure, and integrated. Yet I think the key thing is to understand that just because someone's stepping away from your services, whatever they might be, doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't mean you're bad at your job. It just means at that moment in time, that person isn't right for your services.
Yes.
And you may not know, as you pointed out, Teresa, is that more often than not, especially when you're new in the business, new in the industry, and you're building it, and maybe you don't have the confidence to have these conversations with people, more often than not, they will just maybe send you a text message saying, I'm not training with you anymore. And that's all you get. Or they make up, we make an assumption, they make up some kind of excuse, I can't afford to do this anymore. And you don't know, maybe that's the case, you don't know. So the first thing is, remove any assumptions. Unless you sit down with someone and have a very honest conversation, which is not impossible, yet it is unusual. Unless you sit down and have that very honest conversation, you have no idea why that person has stopped training with you. Therefore, remove any assumptions you might have that they didn't like the way you trained, or that they thought you were a bad trainer, or that they weren't achieving their results, because you don't know that for a fact. Although obviously, I guess if their goal was to be 5 stone lighter and they've put on a stone, then there could be an assumption there to be made. However, we'll come on to that later when we talk about feedback and Kaizen.
Yeah.
So let's make the assumption that they have made gains in some way, shape or form. They have moved forwards. It's just, first of all, removing assumptions. You don't know why they stopped training with you. You have to take what they say at face value. You have to believe that. And then it's about being kind to yourself. Okay, this person stopped training with me. Disappointing, frustrating, of course it is. However, accept it and realize, okay, what can I do to make sure this is less likely to happen again? Again, having a solution to the setback. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's about separating that you as the personal trainer, Group X business owner, whatever it might be, that isn't necessarily your identity. It doesn't make you, if someone steps away from your business, a bad person, bad at what you do. Mm-hmm. It has no impact in that way, shape or form.
Yeah. Okay. All right. And then that's really helpful, isn't it? I think particularly coming into the industry, I think potentially people might lack confidence with being a PT, or may not have a lot of business experience. It's a new field, it's a new world, isn't it? I get it. So this idea of sort of keeping ourselves a little bit away from our business, which is, I'm thinking back to the first chat you and I had when we talked about our why and stuff like that. And that's hard, isn't it? If it comes from here, removing it from sort of like identity and what my business is, because if we truly have a passion in something, we want to be good at it. It's not just successful for business sake. We just want to be really good at it. And then if we don't get the answers or the clarity of why, it might, it might, I was going to say haunt us, but it might, trouble us for a bit. So I really love that idea of sort of removing identity away from the job. But you see, what you do well, Adam, and I think people can take on board or borrow or steal the idea, is that I think This is just an observation, and through the talks we have, I think you have a really good approach to your the way that you've always run your business. You've always had particular hours you're going to work. You're not going to work the weekends. You know, you've not let business be everything for you. So you've been able to keep an identity away from it. But I know many people in the industry who are kind of wrapped up in it every moment. They're always at the gym, they're training themselves, or they're after clients, and it's really hard. So I think the discipline that you've had probably helps you a little bit more than maybe some people. And maybe you can sort of talk on that of, you know, if people are new to the industry or in search of making their business better, how can they, you know, not be in it all the time? Because that's going to be difficult, isn't it, to keep their identity away from business. Have you got any thoughts on that before we come to the idea of worrying about business?
The first thing I'll share is a podcast suggestion for people.
Lovely.
I would think a lot of the listeners have heard of the High Performance Podcast. It's been, I mean, I say just before lockdown, it's phenomenal now. And it's one of the very early ones. I don't remember which one. It's definitely in the first year or so. They did an interview with Johnny Wilkinson. And I still believe it's possibly one of my favorite interviews they did. Now, the reason I bring that up is because it's quite well known, and he's very open about it these days, that when he was a rugby player, he identified himself as a rugby player, not as Johnny Wilkinson. He was a rugby player, and that's all he did. And that led to some tough times for him, to the point where he would be in a hotel room before a game thinking of excuses he could give to the coach so that he didn't have to play, because he didn't want to fail, because he saw himself as a rugby player and nothing else. And so he talks a lot about that, and how now he just sees himself as Johnny Wilkinson. And whether that's Johnny Wilkinson who's washing the dishes up, which he'll do to the best of his ability, or whether it's Johnny Wilkinson the dad and try and be the best dad that he can be, he's very much in the present moment. So I'd highly recommend that podcast. I think they've done a second one since then as well. Yet the first one with him ultimately talks about separating performance and identity. So that would be my first recommendation, is jump on the High Performance Podcast, one of the early episodes with Johnny Wilkinson. Give that a listen. Very deep. I personally love listening to Johnny Wilkinson talk. So that's the first thing. And first of all, thank you for thinking that, or identifying that's something you admire, or seeing me. Hasn't come easy, and I was similar. I'd like to say I'm not going to be the same as Johnny Wilkinson. I'd love to have been as good as him at rugby. Yet for many years, I would identify with myself as initially an athlete when I ran for England, and then a rugby player in my career. So that's how I would see myself. I'm a rugby player. This is what I do. And it's not until you start to accept that when things go wrong and there is failure in there, that actually there is more to life than just rugby or just your business or whatever it might be. So I think one of the biggest tips is to be in that present moment, which I know is a very popular thing to talk about at the moment. Yeah, it's just try to appreciate that the reality is that, yes, you earn your living, you make money from doing something you love and you're passionate about, and you want to master it. And that links back to, I'm sure we've spoken about this on previous chats, is self-determination theory. What motivates people? So 3 aspects of self-determination theory, and one of those is mastery. Most people want to be the best they can at something. That's what motivates them. So inherently, someone who comes into the fitness industry wants to be the best trainer, Group X instructor they want to be. So when it doesn't go to plan, i.e. someone rejects us, we think, well, aren't we good enough? Instead of thinking, okay, why has this person stepped away? Is there something happening in their life that I'm unaware of, that I can't control? So I think the suggestion would be is, yes, whilst you want to master the thing that you want to be great at, the reality is being present enough to choose your response. And we're going to come on to this in a little bit later when we talk about failure as well. It's this idea that the initial reaction is likely to be one of disappointment, frustration, maybe anger. Yet take a moment, step back, be present, and then say, okay, what does this mean to me? What does this mean to my business? Why might this have happened? Is there any more information I can get from this person? And figure out, well, okay, this isn't necessarily about me. It's more than likely about where they're at this moment in time.
Yeah. And I always think of our industry as being quite lonely. And I think it's also reaching out to other professionals who are going through it and just going, you are great at what you do, and does it, it's probably this, it's probably that. I think sometimes we can isolate ourselves in those experiences. And I don't think that's a great thing. Actually, even saying, I've lost my first client to another professional means that you're not hiding it and you're ashamed of it, and it is just part of the process, isn't it? It is business. It's, you are going to lose clients, people, and some people just aren't actually going to like your services, and that's also okay. I think one of the things about taking things personally, and I think you and I have got a few years under our belt, and so maybe a little bit of life experience, which means it's maybe a little bit easier than maybe when I first started in the industry. But catch yourself if it's bringing up anything for you. For example, I knew I wasn't going to do well. I knew I was going to lose my clients. So I knew I wasn't going to be successful. I think just kind of sitting with it and recognizing, oh, it's because I'm not good enough, or I'm just trying to think that there are probably some sort of themes that might run through for a PT if they do get or a group exercise instructor that gets almost that rejection keeps on hitting them in the same way. Like if it's group exercise and somebody walks out the studio, if your first thought is, oh, they don't like me, that they don't like my moves, they don't like my music, rather than they might just need the loo.
It's about reframing, isn't it? And
yeah,
we spoke beforehand. I had my conference at the weekend, and we decided this year to extend the finish times. We normally finish at 5, we finished at 6. And on reflection, we hadn't really considered the impact that might have on people's travel. Now it got to like 5:10, and all of a sudden we had people leaving. Now, in years gone by, I'd have stood there going, oh crap, they don't like the speaker, who, by the way, was Ollie Patrick. So that was never going to be the issue.
He's amazing.
So, yeah. However, a few years ago, I'd have probably stood there and got worried that they were leaving because they didn't like what they were hearing or seeing. However, as I saw people leave, it was, first of all, that's their choice, that's fine. And then it's okay, it could be that they need to get a train. It could be they've got to get home because their children are being looked after. There's all sorts of things it could be. So instead of, by human nature, we're very good at catastrophizing things.
Yeah.
Worst case scenario, they hate it. They're leaving early because they think it's rubbish. The reality is it's probably unlikely to be that. And it's probably something like as simple as they need to get home because it's childcare. They need to get the last train home to Yorkshire or whatever it might be. So it's just about potentially reframing. We'll go into that in a bit more depth shortly, is looking at it from a different perspective, i.e. the other person's perspective, and thinking about, okay, what other reasons might they be leaving early?
Okay.
And I'm with you. It's the first few clients you lose is horrible. And I think you raised a really, really good point, actually, Teresa, was be willing to share it with others. And I'm going to talk about vulnerability a bit later as well. And I can tell you right now, I mean, as we know, I've been PTing most of my adult life. And even when I was playing rugby, even though I was paid to play, I'd still work as a personal trainer. So, however, back then, I'd had very little, unless we'll get onto failure shortly, very little sort of failure in my life at that point. And so when I did lose my first PT client, I didn't tell anyone, not one person. I didn't want no one to think I was a failure. Why would I have done that? Because of the environment I was in within rugby and all other things potentially sort of supporting that fact that if they've left me, that means I'm not good at what I do. Was how I couldn't separate performance from my identity.
No.
Let's do that back then. So, as you said, the best thing you can do is just share it. You tell another PT or someone, I lost my first client, or I lost a client today, and I'm really, really frustrated because I thought I was doing a really good job and I don't understand why. Talk to someone about it. Have a little chat, because if all you do is hide it and protect yourself from it, that's not going to help.
And if you get found out as well, don't you, like, of that situation, and then you're sort of covering up loads of things, and they go, oh, Frank hasn't been in for ages, and you know, I think it's really important to share and say what has come up for you as well, which you say is, I feel really frustrated, but actually if you've got someone close in the industry, you can say, you know, I'm really disappointed, but I've kind of taken it a bit personally, and then, you know, I think it's really important to be able to do that. Coming back to what
one quick thing, Tiz,
sure.
you said that we're talking about sort of losing clients or having setbacks. We spoke about being kind to ourselves. Now, a couple of things there, and also you said about sort of speaking to other people and people that will support you. There's a couple of things we need to be aware of. First thing is, when being kind to yourself or in that situation, is maybe just ask yourself a question: is what would said personal trainer tell me if I said to them? So Teresa, let's say you're a PT as well, and I come to you, and in my head my question is, okay, I lost a client today. If I was talking to Teresa, what advice would she give me about this? Because whatever advice that would be, or or I might say to myself, if Teresa lost a client, what advice would I give her? Because you know what, that's probably the advice you need to give yourself first of all. And the other thing to be aware of is, whilst you want people to support you, you don't necessarily need cheerleaders all the time.
No.
Because that's not going to serve you either. So there's no point having people around you who tell you you're amazing at what you do when maybe you're not quite as amazing as you really think you are. So, and again, we'll come on to this a little bit later, is make sure the people that are around you are, yes, they're cheerleaders when you need it. However, they're also honest, or a phrase that I use is they're also your loving critic.
Yes. Yeah, you've said this in a previous episode, and it's really, really important, isn't it? The network around you that you really know you can trust, because there's nothing worse, is there, than someone telling you that you know is a load of BS, because then we're not getting to the real cut of it and stuff. I'd like to come back just with regards to setbacks, just briefly, about, you know, maybe almost preparing for them, considering they might happen. But I wanted to make sure that then we're not asking the PTs or the Group X instructor to start worrying endlessly about things. So is it that you're just saying, just have a few strategies in place, almost have like, you know, don't be living right on the edge of your expenses and reliant on income? Are you sort of saying that you could sort of, I guess, protect yourself so you're not like in the poo if your first client, I think there's a different word that I could have said, but what are your thoughts on how you don't end up worrying that it's going to happen all the time? We know setbacks will happen, but that it's not gonna kill you worrying about it.
Again, it's about the phrase you say, is that realistic optimist. It's knowing that actually having faith and trust in yourself, knowing you have the skills to do what you need to do to be successful, to, when I say successful, to earn the amount of money you need to earn, to pay your bills, to do what you want to do in life, yet also having that sense of fulfillment. So I think it's realizing that actually, if you believe you can do that, that's important. Yet just having that awareness, going, you know what? Yeah, what will happen if I did lose 2 clients? Because again, the finances are important, like you say, is as a PT, and I know we haven't gone into finances in great depth through this series yet, it's having that little bit of a buffer. So yes, so knowing if you were to lose 3 clients, which might happen for whatever reason, you might have a client that falls pregnant who wants to stop training for some reason, you might have a client that moves out of the area, and you might have a client who gets made redundant in the space of a month, and then all of a sudden you're like, okay, so it's just going, okay, what's my backup plan? What's my plan B? And going, okay, well, if that were to happen, where would I get my next clients from? So I guess it's always knowing, or like I said, that negative visualization, knowing what you're going to do if something doesn't go to plan. And I wouldn't necessarily suggest having it for every single scenario, because that is, you will drive yourself mad with that. Yet what maybe you would like to do is just pop down in your diary, or however you write and capture your thoughts, just go, okay, what are the 3 biggest threats to my business?
Yeah.
So some of you on your level 3s, and maybe in other things that you've done, you might have done a SWOT analysis. So strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So here it's just doing an abbreviated version. What are your 3 biggest threats to your business, i.e. what could stop you from making money? Write them down. What's the solution? So now you've done your negative visualization. You've written down what the 3 threats are. You've then pictured what you're going to do to make sure if they were to happen, you would overcome them. So you've got them written down, and then just forget about them.
Love that. Love that.
And then if it does happen, go to your diary, go to your phone, wherever they are. Right. The threat was if I was to lose 3 clients in quick succession, this is what I was going to do. Right. Let's put that into action.
Absolutely. Love that. Okay, great. So we've looked at setbacks. We're going to have to look at dear old rejection. How do we deal with rejection? And I guess we've already looked at it a bit. So what I'm going to ask you to cover is rejection, not sort of within your business of maybe clients. I mean, please feel free to talk about that. But I'd also like us to look at what might be rejection, you know, a PT applying for a job, a group exercise instructor going for an audition. What are your, you know, what are your tips of dealing with that rejection? Do you, you know, do you help it sort of fire you up to be something better, or do you just ignore it? What are your thoughts on rejection?
Okay, so I'm going to be honest here. This is an environment, I guess, a context that I'm not really that familiar with, in that I've never really applied for jobs or rejected. Being self-employed, I've always found my own way, if you like. So, in fact, I've not applied for a job for about 20 years, maybe longer. So it's not something I can talk about from experience. So I'll talk about maybe more theoretical, which hopefully will give some insight to people. So
Right.
I think when it comes to applying for a role, a position, an audition to teach at the brand new all singing, all dancing gym in your local area, whatever it might be, I think the key thing is, again, it kind of comes back to the idea, first of all, is separating performance from identity.
Yeah.
For some reason, you just might have been the right person at that time for that environment, and you have no idea why. So I think that the biggest bit of advice I would suggest you could do, and this isn't always going to be possible, is once you get that email, that maybe letter these days, who knows, that email more than likely, is first of all, step back. And in fact, I'll come on to feedback a bit later, so I was going to give you a model then. So I would suggest is once you get that rejection email or whatever form it comes in, is just ask them for some honest feedback. Is what could you have done? What could you have done differently that might have changed their decision? So it's not a why didn't I get the job, because that will tell you what you're bad at. It's what could I have done differently? So what would you need to have done differently to have got that role, to be able to teach that class? And that's really going to give you more information. So I think the key thing is, have you failed, or are you discovering something new about yourself? That's the key thing.
Boom. Yes, love that.
That's how I would reframe rejection from a potential job role. Is you can either look at it as a failure. I failed, I've been rejected, I'm no good, I knew I wasn't good enough, I should never applied for it. Or have I learned something new that I can put into practice moving forwards? And so for me, it would be a email back. And obviously, if you're applying to a chain of gyms and they have hundreds of people applying, you're unlikely to get feedback. Yet in fitness, that's unusual. So the reality is there's probably only a relatively small number of people going for the role that you're going for. And therefore, asking for some honest feedback as to why you didn't get that one. Also, it's not why, but as to what you could have done differently to have it for them, so I get my words out, for them to have taken you on.
Yes. Is
probably the most important thing you can do. And then, putting it into practice.
Okay. And I do wonder sometimes, I've been lucky enough, Adam, that I haven't had to do that either much in my life, sort of apply for jobs. I've sort of, been very lucky. But I think it's something that happens a lot, and it's brave, isn't it, to apply for things and stuff. and auditions and things. But I do wonder a lot of the time when people do get that rejection, maybe an audition that they kind of knew anyway, that perhaps they weren't the right fit, because sometimes it would just be a brand decision, won't it? That it's just don't fit. And often, I've turned down opportunities because actually I realized I don't align with them. It's not that way. It's actually no. And certainly when I first started in the industry, I was sort of like, I got lots of opportunities and I turned some of them down, and people were like, why'd you turn that down? I'm going, well, I don't think I'm right for it yet. And people were like, yeah, but it's a great opportunity. I'm like, yeah. And people thought that was weird to do that, but I would have almost felt like I was cheating the system, that it wasn't authentic. It was just an opportunity that I was jumping on. It wasn't lack of confidence. I think the confidence came from the fact that I knew it wasn't perhaps right for me at that time. And so I think sometimes with rejection, we shouldn't beat ourselves up about it. But I think potentially there are times when we know I wasn't fully prepared. I haven't had enough experience. I wasn't quite at my best in that interview. I was a bit nervous, or I got a weird feel from the person anyway. I think what I worry about is if people get a hard rejection and they had no idea that it could be a potential. And I think we've really got to safeguard ourselves from that if we think, oh, I'm definitely going to get that job, and then we get a hard rejection. I think we've got to be open to the fact that we're not always just going to walk into things easily. It's a tough one, isn't it? Rejection, as it were. So I know we were going to talk about reframing failure, and it's a really interesting concept, using the word failure. And some people think failure is a very negative word. It's got negative connotations. I think when I hear you saying the word failure, I don't see it as a negative thing, because I know your mindset that goes around it, But if someone said to me, oh, you failed at that, I'd be like, what? So can you maybe, before we talk about reframing failure, can you maybe explain what your thoughts are on failing and failure?
Well, first of all, I'll tell you what my thoughts used to be, because I grew up with a very, very different approach to failure. And I guess for a lot of my 20s, if not all of it, my mantra is very much that, so some of you watching might be familiar with the cyclist Lance Armstrong, who, if you're not familiar, he then got banned for life from cycling because it turned out he had basically won the Tour de France 7 times whilst with lots and lots of illegal drugs in his system. So at the time, though, I was a big fan of his. Fans me wrong, an admirer of his.
Yes.
He had a phrase that became quite synonymous with who he was, and that was, pain is temporary, failure is forever. And I kind of lived my life like that, and that wasn't healthy. Although at the time, I thought it was brilliant. I loved this idea that, pain is temporary, so I'm going to put myself in as much pain as possible, whether it be in training, whether it be in business, whatever it might be. I'm going to put myself in as much pain as possible because it's not there forever. However, if I don't make this work, that's going to be with me for life. And that was very much my approach to life. And don't get me wrong, sometimes it could serve me quite well, especially in a sport. Especially, that's not right. In certain sporting environments, it worked for me at that moment in time. However, it didn't set me up for a healthy approach to failing later in life. So when things later in my life didn't go to plan, I actually struggled to deal with failure because my attitude had been, I'm not going to fail, and failure is this horrendous thing that no one does. And people who fail are failures, and failures, no one wants to be a failure.
Yes. Yeah.
So that stopped me from talking to people when things didn't go to plan. And to go back to that word, I certainly wasn't a very vulnerable person. I wouldn't share any failures or perceived failures with people. So I just want to put that out there, because certainly whilst my attitude towards failure is very different these days, it hasn't always been that way. And I went to a very good school where people got good grades and did great things, and failure wasn't a thing from the age of 11. Failure wasn't a word that was even in my vocabulary, wasn't taught to me, if you like. Yes. So however, people's attitude, I would say in general, has changed a lot in recent years for lots of different reasons. I think one of the reasons is this idea, and we have spoken about this before, is this idea of a growth mindset. And the idea that we have a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. So I would say that for a lot of my life, earlier life, I was very fixed, i.e. I believed that I had certain skill sets, and that's what I was there to do, and I could enhance those skill sets. And however, I wasn't about learning other things. It was just about learning from my failures. It was, if I don't fail in the first place, I don't need to learn anything. So it's about not failing, avoiding failure. So this idea of a growth mindset, if something that doesn't go to plan, it's figuring out what didn't go to plan, learning from it, making changes, and going again. So I think growth mindset and Carol Dweck's TED talk from, I don't know how many years ago now, 10, 12 years ago, kind of has made failing more accessible or popular, whatever word you want to put in there, or much more of an acceptable thing to do. Don't get me wrong, I still work with a lot of corporate organizations who still deem failure as a bad thing. So interesting, I'm reading a lot around failure at the moment, and I've got a book that I'll share with you later. And I think it'd be good to find the difference between a mistake and a failure. Okay, because a lot of people might see it as the same thing. So by definition, a mistake is when something doesn't go to plan, when you already have the information or the skills to do it right. So I know how to put the glass back on the shelf. If I drop it and on the floor, that's a mistake on my part, because I've done it 100 times. I've got the skill set to do it. I've got the coordination to do it. It's a mistake. I've dropped the glass on the floor. A failure is when something doesn't go to plan and you didn't necessarily have the required skill set, understanding, ability to do it in the first place. So you've tried it, it hasn't worked out, therefore it's a failure, but you didn't have the skill set in the beginning. So there's a difference between a mistake and a failure. So what that means is, because you didn't necessarily have the skill set in the first place and you failed at the task you set out to do, therefore it means if you learn from that failure, i.e. you learn what you need to do to improve it, you're more likely to succeed the next time. So I think that's a really important thing to differentiate between a mistake and a failure is the first thing. And we then have this idea we can have basic failures, stuff that doesn't really affect us. We then have something called complex failures, which I'm not going to go into details today because we haven't got time for that. So you've got basic failures, complex failures, and then these are the failures that we want to have not necessarily more of, yet these are the failures that we thrive off of. And that's intelligent failures, i.e. failures that give us information for us to improve, that we can change and have an impact moving forwards in our lives, in our businesses. And intelligent failures are good because we learn from them. And it goes back to that phrase I said a little bit earlier, the idea of, am I failing or am I learning something new? So how you reframe it. So what we're now understanding from, whether it be from things like growth mindset, even from things like motivation and self-determination theory, that actually, if we're going to master something, we have to fail at it. And failure is good because we're going to learn something. And Johnny Wilson talks a lot about it in that podcast. I mentioned how, again, he avoided failure for many, many years. And he believes that impacted him as a rugby player and as a human being. So the idea is that if we've got intelligent failures happening, then we're always moving forwards. Now, don't get me wrong, you don't want to be making multiple intelligent failures every day. It's about taking a little bit of risk. So there's always a little risk in there. However, about reframing as well, it's this idea of learning over knowing. You don't know what's going to happen until you give it a go. Take a bit of a risk, and then learn from that intelligent failure.
Yeah, love that. Okay, that's plugged in there. And as you were saying that, I was thinking about, learn from my failures. That expression a lot of older people I know have said in the past to me, learn from my failures. And I think a lot of these failures we have to go through ourselves, don't we? And they are so, I don't know, minuscule often, and so personalized. Of course, we thank goodness there's we can learn from what other people are doing, but we have to, don't we, have failures along our path in order to have that growth and stuff, and also to sort of build a little resilience as well. to think it's all going to go right and easily. And also we're role modeling to our clients. I mean, I don't think we need to lay it out on the line to our clients, say, well, I failed here, failed here, failed here. But we got to be human. You mentioned vulnerability. We got to be human. We absolutely got to role model that. And my sort of mantra is good enough. I've definitely come from a perfectionism type thing. We know why. I've done the work on it, and I now work on the idea of good enough. And and failing at things, it can, I don't know, it might bring up something that I know I then got to do a bit of work on, whether it's in the business or it's on myself. And I think that's always growth is going to occur in that way, isn't it? So I kind of find it, I don't know, it's kind of exciting. I'm kind of curious in that way. That's not so easy when you're at the beginning of your career. I think it's quite hard because you haven't built that resilience, you haven't got that network around you and stuff like that. So I guess maybe the risks you might take now are greater than maybe the risks you would have done when you're younger. I don't know, in business.
I've always been quite a risk taker. So
I love that smirk on your face there. That was brilliant.
I don't think my mindset these days is much different to earlier on. I would argue that the risks, if I didn't take the risks that I took early on in my career, I probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing now.
Yes.
So, and it's interesting, without going and talking about me, what's interesting is that linked into that idea of failing is a perfectionist. And I have a similar sort of philosophy, is better, not perfect.
Yeah.
And there's also a famous kind of phrase, this idea is, oh, my mind's gone blank now. It'll come back to me, but I've got a little comment around perfectionism. Oh, perfection is poverty. That's it. Perfection is poverty is another little phrase I like. But me personally, it's the idea of better, not perfect. However, the idea of perfectionism and avoiding failure are very much linked together for sure. And I think the idea of perfectionism for me, I mean, coming back to this idea of vulnerability and not wanting to fail, when I did my first ever presented my first ever workshop, which was FitPro, possibly around 15 years ago now, all I remember being when I used to step on stage to present, whether it be a conference or a workshop, I felt I had to be perfect. I felt that I had to deliver everything without fault. I didn't believe in looking at notes. I had to memorize everything because I wanted people to look at me and believe I was perfect, and that failure wasn't an option. And that's the standards that I set myself. And then when I realized, actually, I don't have to be perfect. And if I do make a mistake, as long as I own that mistake or own that failure, it's not a problem, within reason, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
So I think the idea that failure and perfectionism are very much interlinked, for sure. 100%. And you're dead right, when you start off, it's not easy. Yet what I would say is that most people start off, you've probably had something, and there's something I didn't need to come back to, it just popped into my head. Whilst, yes, you might not have had failures or made mistakes within health and fitness, I'm sure you've had mistakes or made mistakes and had failures elsewhere in your life. So how can you use that to help you? Because being robust and being resilient doesn't just come from the industry you work in, it comes from life experience.
Yes.
And most people will have had experience in their life that will help them deal with the negative, the mistakes and failures within their business.
Yeah.
So, and then something I just want to come back to about learning from your mistakes, jump to Spain. Again, I've only read this research recently, so I might not get it completely right. However, it is in the book I'm going to mention. It's that, interesting, the research was done with, I think it was like 80 surgeons. And what they found, oddly, and I was kind of with you, is my thoughts with you learning from your mistakes, what they found from this particular study was that while surgeons did learn from their own mistakes and failures, they actually learned more from watching other people make mistakes and failings, interestingly. And the hypothesis behind that is that they can look at it from a different perspective and see what was done incorrectly and then make the changes relevant to them. So there is actually some research saying that you can learn, not all the time, as much, if not more, from other people's mistakes and failures
Yeah.
than your own, interestingly.
And what I'm hearing on that is that is actually viewing the kind of operation taking. So you're kind of, you're watching as they're going through the experience. So it's not like my dad saying, oh, 30 years ago, what, it is quite in the moment, as it were.
So to give you an example, when I first started personal training at Holmes Place in Notting Hill, I remember looking at all the other personal trainers. So I was new in there. The gym had been open 3 months. So there was all these PTs it was a brand new gym. It was there at the time, it was their flagship gym. It was stunning, Notting Hill. So you can imagine the clientele. And all the PTs there had been there for 3 or 4 months and had kind of built their business up. So I've gone in there, never PT'd before. And I didn't believe I had the skills that they had or the knowledge that they had. So I looked and thought, well, what can I do to set myself apart from them? So what I looked at was, if you like, the mistakes they were making. And for what I saw with the mistakes was their customer service, or their failings was their customer service, was that they weren't, I didn't believe, looking after their clients particularly well. So what I did when I started getting built up once I had my clients, was I would do things like fill my clients' water bottle up in between sets. I would pass my clients their towel. I would take the dumbbells off of my clients on their reps, all that kind of stuff. So I was observing what other people weren't doing, i.e. possibly you could call them both mistakes and failures, and going, okay, what can I then learn from that, and how can I then put that into my business? Yeah. So what you might want to do based upon that research is, if you're working in a gym environment, other PTs around you or other Group X instructors, learn from what they're doing, what is perceived as what they're doing incorrectly. Make sure you do it well or better.
I like that a lot. I just have to mention a couple of times when you've been saying really, really cool information. There's been some balloons that have come up on Zoom, and I have no idea why. Have you seen? It's really funny. I don't know whether it's something to do with my iWatch, but you were.
I apologise. So I have an iMac, and I recently upgraded to whatever operating system it was. And since I've been doing that, I've been running workshops and having meetings, and all of a sudden I've got you on. I can only see you at the moment, Therese, but when I've been on view as well, balloons appear, thumbs up appear.
Yeah, I saw a thumbs up earlier.
Yeah, and I believe I did Google it, and apparently it's a little bug on the new operating system which they haven't fixed yet.
Brilliant.
Which is linked to Zoom.
I loved it because it was just like there was a celebration of your wisdom. So it's brilliant. So let's come on to always striving for improvement and that constant refinement. You were talking about Kaizen. You were going to cover mastering the art. If you could explain to people what it is and perhaps how they might be able to use it in business, fitness, life, would be amazing.
Kaizen I came across Kaizen with PTA Global, again, back in the FitPro days, and introduced to Kaizen by the likes of Bobby Cappuccio and Rodney Corn, etc. And it changed the way I looked at things. And they introduced it to PTA Global in a slightly different way to the way I'm going to talk about it today. In essence, Kaizen is all about a Japanese term, and it comes from this idea of continuous self-improvement. And the reality is, whether you're a personal trainer, whether you're a Group X instructor, whether you own a business, whether you work in fitness or not, it's kind of irrelevant. Is that if you want to master anything, if you want to truly have I believe anyway, a fulfilling life, then Kaizen has to be there somewhere. You have to be seeking out how you can continuously improve yourself. Now, that's not going, I need to learn this or I need to do this better. It's actually seeking information from people you trust that will help you understand what you need to change and improve. And so when we were doing PTA Global, Kaizen was something that we would give, or when we deliver an education, you would ask your clients to do periodically. It might have been every 6 weeks, every few months, whatever you felt like. And it's something, an ethos, I guess, that I've carried on into further down the road in my life and my businesses. And within PTA Global, it's a form, and it was kind of like, I can't remember all the questions, but it would be things like, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you enjoy our personal training sessions? 9 or 8, let's say. And then the next question would be, what would make the enjoyment one score better? And they would say, oh, if Adam was to play with balloons in our sessions. So all of a sudden you've got something tangible that you can improve upon. Okay. Now, and that's also linking a bit to something called motivational interviewing when you're scaling. So the reality is that you go away with something tangible versus if you say to your clients, are you enjoying my training sessions face to face? They go, yeah, it's great. Well, it's not going to give you much information. So you get a score and then you ask, well, what would make it better? What's the one thing about our sessions that you really enjoy? What's one thing about our sessions you don't enjoy? So now I'm starting to build a picture of the person in front of me. If they've gone away, I've built a relationship with them, I've got rapport. So hopefully they're going to feel this Kaizen and forming truthfully. And they're telling you what they do and they don't like. So you know what you need to keep doing and you know what to remove. You know one thing that will make the sessions more enjoyable. So you're building up this picture of what you can do better, how you can improve the PT sessions, how you become a better personal trainer. And I think it's very important that in your business, you continue doing that. So whatever your business might look like, and you can tailor this idea of self-improvement based upon what you want to achieve. Now, I'm going to give you a few examples of how I do this, and then again you can choose. So in the business world, corporate world, there's something called a 360, and from my experience in health and fitness, it's not something that's done that often, if at all. And a 360 is where you'll get feedback from different people in the organization from different levels and different roles. So you'll get feedback from someone who sits next to you, you'll get feedback from your line manager, you might get feedback from a client or a stakeholder within the organization. So ultimately you get feedback from different viewpoints and different perspectives, which means the feedback you get in theory will be very different because everyone sees you, works with you, views you differently. And I think that's really important to be aware of. And going back to the idea of cheerleaders earlier, is if you've got a raving fans of client base, they'll probably only give you the stuff that make you feel good, which is great. However, it doesn't serve you. So my question to those listening is, how can you get feedback that's valuable? How can you get information that's really going to help you make a difference or a change that is going to impact your business? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So what I do periodically, i.e. once a year or so not very often, is I reach out to 5 to 10 people in my network with a list of 10 questions. And I realize that these questions might take time. So I choose people that I know that will value what I'm asking them to do, mm-hmm. and will take the time to do it. And those questions might be things like, what are 3 strengths that you believe I bring to my business? And how have you seen those strengths lead to my success? So I've got 3 things that I know that I'm doing well, mm-hmm. and how it actually has helped me grow and evolve what I do. So I know to keep doing it. On the flip side, I might say, okay, what is one thing that you feel if I did differently would take my business to the next level? Mm-hmm. And now all of a sudden I'm going to get something that I might never have thought of.
Yeah.
Or the other question I like to ask is, what do people say about me when I'm not in the room? And you get some interesting answers. So again, I'm doing that knowing that I might get some information, some feedback that might upset me, that might challenge me, that might frustrate me. And I'm going to come on to how you deal with that in a moment. So that's something I do. So I go to different people who I work with in different ways to get information about me. I might do it after a conference. So last year I spoke at a conference. It's all smallish, 100, 150 people. And on the train on the way home, I sent an email to 3 people who were there, all of them industry leaders and people we all know, you would know very well, Teresa, and the industry knows well. And the questions were, again, they were scaling questions. 1, what did you score me out of 10? Mm-hmm. And one thing I could have done, what would have made, what out of 1 to 10, what impact did I have on the room in your opinion? And then what would have made my talk 1 score better? Okay, so this particular person, and it's still, and I use this example a lot because it was like, wow, it's eye-opening for me, was he gave me an 8.5 out of 10. So I was pretty happy with that. He's quite, I value his opinion. I would say he doesn't give those scores easily. And he said to me, when you were delivering your talk, which is an hour long, he said, you seem to focus all your energy to your left-hand side of the room. And he said, and to me, there was a couple of influential people on that side of the room. And he said, it felt as though you were trying to impress those particular people in the room and forgot about the rest of the room.
Interesting.
And I sat there and read that. I went, wow, I hadn't realized that. Now he said it, he's so right. And now I'm very much aware of that when I've got people that I want to impress, which again, we could go into conversation around that. Yeah, we're not going to. Yeah, people that I want, that I value and I think that I admire. I'm very aware of that now, not to focus my energies on them and to focus my energies on the whole room. So now that was some very tangible feedback based upon 2 questions.
Yeah, 2 questions. You got a massive thing that will make a huge impact, won't it?
And it has. It's made an absolutely massive impact on me because I was completely unaware of it, which links back into the thing about feedback. Is feedback only comes if you're open to being more self-aware. And that's the thing, is that to grow, to take on board Kaizen, to deal with setbacks, it's about having self-awareness, which is easier said than done.
Yeah. And as you said that, you had fireworks come out of your head. That's brilliant. Zoom. Literally, it's like Zoom has timed around.
I've not had the fireworks come out.
Fireworks. It was really good. It was amazing. It was like, phew, this is all of the information I'm imparting on you.
How cool is that?
That was very cool.
When I first saw this coming out, I was thinking, is this some sort of AI thing that Zoom have now created, that they hear you talking and then when certain trigger words, fireworks come out or balloons celebrate?
Imagine if you'd done that and that had happened, when they would be like, oh my gosh, it must be true. So I think we've looked at a lot of things that we were going to talk about. I know that there's a couple of things that you wanted to talk about. Maybe you'd said there's some books and maybe some resources and stuff like that. Obviously, people listening into this, like I said, we've got the 3 other episodes within the series. So there's certainly that. I just want to obviously mention before we get to that bit, Adam, as well, that you do support people with businesses who are fitness professionals. And can you just talk to me a little bit more about that? About how you offer those services?
Of course. And can I do that? Can we come back to that, Teresa? I know you kind of separated.
Of course we can.
A little bit about feedback first of all.
Of course. Yes.
Because I think there's a couple of critical things I want to do. I know I'm aware of time. I know we've been talking a long time, so I won't go into details. I'll just give you the overview of this. So the first thing, talking about whether it's even with dealing with failure, it's about having that, we just sort of said, that self-awareness around it. So how do you prepare for failures, i.e. the information you get from the failure? How do you prepare with feedback that you might get from that client that didn't quite like that session, or that client that decided to stop working with you and they've actually given you some honest feedback? How do you prepare and deal with that? So a few things to be aware of. First thing, when you're preparing for feedback, it is the idea of having an open mind to the information, i.e. you've no idea what they're going to say. Have the open mind, be willing to listen. So the old kind of Stephen Covey adage is that is seek to listen and not respond. First thing, have that growth mindset that we've mentioned today and previously. Be willing to be vulnerable, i.e. admit that you didn't realize something, that you did make a mistake, or that you don't know the answer to that, or that you could have done that differently. There's nothing wrong with that. Have no judgment, because here's the thing with feedback, it's just someone's opinion. Now, if one person tells you they felt that was the scenario or the outcome, or that's why they feel like that, that's how they feel. That's their truth. It doesn't make it true.
Yeah.
Subtle difference. So when someone's offering you feedback, it's their opinion on what they saw at that moment in time. However, if 10 people give you the feedback, it's probably true. So bear that in mind. So no judgment there. It's their truth. It's not the truth. And as we've already said, separate the idea of performance from identity. So those are a few things when you're receiving feedback, be aware of. Now, here's the thing. There is a model, believe it or not, that you can use when receiving feedback. And it's called the Sarah model. Okay. So if you're listening, you might want to grab a quick pen and paper and write this down. So if you've just been delivered a load of feedback, maybe someone's filled in a Kaizen form, or you've sent out a questionnaire to some trusted or some loving critics maybe, or maybe your line manager is giving you, your PT manager is giving you some feedback on how you deliver sessions. Here's the Sarah model. So the first thing is, and this is going to help you reflect basically, because again, there's the famous American author John Dewey, and one of his sort of quotes is that we don't learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. And this is the key thing, you've got to reflect on the feedback. So what surprised you in the feedback that was given? Was there anything that angered you? Was there anything you resisted or pushed back on? What are you happy to accept about the feedback? And what made you happy? Now, you don't have to answer all 5. You might just pick 1 or 2. You might not feel angry. That's fine. It's not about finding the anger. It's just, is it there? And reflecting on that. Well, why did it make you angry? Actually, it's because my idea of perfectionism, that's what's made me angry, because I wanted it to be perfect and it wasn't. And that angers me or frustrates me. So that's the Sarah model. What surprised you? What angered you? What did you resist or push back to? What were you accepting? And what made you happy?
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
A little model you can use when dealing with feedback.
Yeah.
And the final thing I'm going to talk about, because I know we want to start wrapping up now, is just that whether it's dealing with setbacks and rejections, whether it's understanding how to fail intelligently, whether it's receiving feedback from someone to help you grow and master that art of Kaizen, is this idea that we have to stop and breathe. Take a moment, take an opportunity to pause, to then challenge what's being said. When I say challenge that, not push back, to question it. Say, okay, what does this mean to me? How am I going to respond to this? That's the next part. How do I choose to respond? So it's to stop. We often, when we get given feedback or when we fail at something, we often, and Daniel Kahneman, if you read his book, Think Fast and Slow, he talks about thinking fast and thinking slow. We often go to this idea of reacting subconsciously when we fail at something. We react instinctively. That doesn't serve us. So when something doesn't go to plan, or if you get some feedback that you don't like, again, when we get feedback we don't like, the first thing we do is push back, is stop, pause, breathe, question it, challenge it, inside your head, have that conversation. Is this true? How could I have done that differently? Then choose your response to the setback, the failure, or the feedback. And then I will finish here with a quote. I did write this down just so I remember it. It's from Viktor Frankl. So if you've not read his book, Man's Search for Meaning, I'd highly recommend it. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. Stop, challenge, choose your response. That's where growth and freedom comes from, your choice of response.
I'm glad we came back to that. Thank you. Love that. And I read that based upon your recommendation. I think it was probably in, I don't know, the first one of this series that we...
Well, that's what we spoke about, meaning and your why. So
yes, that's why. Yes, yeah. I listened to it. Yeah. Adam, thank you. I do want to ask you about what you're doing business wise to support fitness professionals. This is something that, you know, you've done an amazing job at supporting the FitPro community just in this series, and you do lots for us as well. And there's other stuff that the FitPro community can reach out for you to do with them. So talk to us about your business support.
Yeah, very simply, I do provide business coaching for fitness professionals. So whether you're a personal trainer who wants to grow your business, maybe you're a Group X instructor who's opening or running a Group X business of some kind, maybe you're opening a gym for the first time, whatever it might be, is might be doing, I offer coaching around that. So been doing that for a while now with great results. So helping people who are stuck as well. Sometimes it's just that you've been doing it for a long time. You've got to a point where maybe your income's become a bit stagnant. Maybe even your kind of enthusiasm's a little bit sort of stuck in the mud. So it's just about sometimes kind of reinvigorating that energy, getting you going again, helping you understand what you can do to move to the next level. And yeah, so if you're interested or anyone would like some business coaching, drop me a line either via, you've got my Instagram or my LinkedIn, drop me a DM on any of those, which is in, or Teresa provides all of those.
I do. It will be underneath this.
Or you can email FitPro and they can connect you via email as well. So if you feel that anything in this series has resonated with you, and you feel that I might be able to help, support, guide you and your business in some way, shape or form, then yeah, please do drop me a line and we can just have an informal chat to see if I'm the right fit for you. Because as we've said all the way through this, I might not be the right fit. I could be the fit that's going to help you. Who knows, until we chat.
Amazing. Thank you so much. You have shared a lot. I love the quotes. I love the recommendations. I love the reflection. I love the transparency and honesty. And I just hope that anybody listening in, that you've had that opportunity to reflect on the work that you're doing. One thing for sure I know about the FitPro community is, they're a community who've been often around for a long, long time, servicing an amazing fitness industry, and hope continue to do so for a long, long time. So thank you for tuning in. Thank you to you, Adam. And Adam has just put his finger up to say, please, can I say one more thing? Yes, of course you can. Come on then. What's this book? Yes.
So I've got my books for what we've spoken about today. 3 books I recommend. Thanks for the feedback. Brilliant book. Again, it's a lot of stuff I've mentioned today and goes into loads of depth. It's out of the Harvard Negotiation Project. Sounds flash, so I reckon it probably is. So a couple of professors there. Another one is Think Again by Adam Grant. If you're going to social media, he's all over over Instagram. He is an organizational psychologist. Think Again, though, ultimately he's challenging the way we think, accepting that it's good to know what we don't know. There's nothing wrong with that. And the final one was the book that I mentioned a few times, where the research came from. This literally only came out the other week. Amy Edmondson is the woman who kind of 30 years ago brought psychological safety into public domain, and in recent years has become very popular. Her new book is The Right Kind of Wrong. And so a lot of stuff I spoke about today has come from that book. So I'd highly recommend that.
Amazing. Thank you, Adam. Follow Adam based upon the fact that he's always reading a lot of books, and I get lots of book recommendations from him by just following him. Adam, I think one of the things I'd like to, suggest to you or ask you is, when are you going to write your own book?
Not the first person that's asked me that. Not sure.
Exactly.
It's there. I'm just unsure of what the topic would be. So if anyone has having listened to this, has any ideas of what the topic could be on, or even the title to inspire me, then please drop me a line. I'd love to hear from it. However, there is an itch that seems to be getting bigger and bigger on a monthly basis about, how can I write my own book, especially as I'm going to a friend's book launch next week. Yes.
There you go. And I think what you heard here, FitPro community, is Adam has just asked me to be his agent. So that's great news. All right. So look, thank you so much, Adam. Thank you so much, FitPro community, for joining us on these. And I just really hope that it enhances what you're doing out there. Reach out to us at FitPro, contact, follow Adam, and we'll probably get him on next year because he's all right at this sort of stuff. All right. Thank you, Adam. Thank you, community.
Thanks, Teresa.
Bye.